Lab 4 deals with a technology known as containers. So the Microsoft Learn curriculum focuses on the platform Docker to host its containers. So here on the Microsoft website, there are 4 different kinds of container images that you can pull into Docker. And so this lab is going to focus on standing up a virtual machine, installing the Docker runtime, and then creating containers to run our web page, our web server. So in this particular instance, I have 3 virtual machines that are just running a basic HTML web page. In this case, I don't necessarily need a full-blown VM to host that one web page. So what containers can allow us to do is create multiple instances of a runtime to then run applications in a containerized format. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the script here. There's nothing too fancy here. We're just creating a group, and then we're creating the VM. One thing to note is I am using a specific size VM here. I am using a standard underscore DS2 version 3. It supports nested virtualization. So most container runtimes are focused on Linux. But when you're talking about Windows containers, we can actually use Hyper-V. So we are going to be installing Windows containers using a Hyper-V server. So we're going to use the set-azvm extension command to install the Hyper-V role, and then we also need to enable the containers feature. And then just reboot the server here. So let's go ahead and create our Docker host. And then just really quickly, these are other SKUs that you can use for VMs that support nested virtualization. For example, if you're using Hyper-V, you have to enable nested virtualization with a command known as set VM processor, and you expose some of the CPU to the virtual machine. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this in the Cloud Shell. So it's created our resource group, and now it's going to create our Windows 2022 data center on a 10.70.70.0/16 network. And here is the Docker host group. Okay, now all the resources have been created, and we'll wait for the virtual machine to finish its configuration, and then it will move on to applying the VM extension. I am going to pause the video here while the VM finishes creating. Okay, so the virtual machine has been created and it's running, and now it is applying the extension. So it's going to install the Hyper-V role, enable the containers feature, and then restart the VM. So this particular extension set does take some time to apply, so I'm going to pause the video while the extension applies. And while you're waiting for these extensions to be applied, you can go into the virtual machine, and under settings, under extensions and applications, you can monitor the status here. You can actually create it all. You can do it all in the web browser if you don't want to use the Cloud Shell. You you can click Add and then find the custom script extension and then configure it that way. But here we're using the Cloud Shell. Okay, we just got a nice message here in the Cloud Shell that the provisioning has succeeded. We can also see that in the web portal. So now we're just going to RDP into this guy. Docker host, admin 01, our password. So the first thing we have to do is download and install Docker. So we're just going to go to the Docker homepage and download the runtime and install it. Okay, now that we're on the host, I'm going to open up PowerShell. Show you that we are on the Docker host, and Docker is not installed. So we're going to open up a web browser. So we are on the Docker Docs website. We're going to download Docker Desktop for Windows. Okay, so we're going to install Docker. So depending on what kind of containers you're running, you'll do different configurations here. So the default, it wants you to use the Windows subsystem for Linux instead of Hyper-V, but we have a Windows server with the Hyper-V role installed. So we're going to uncheck that box. And in this case, we want to allow Windows containers to be used with the installation. There is some concern about security. It has to do with the administrator account, the container administrator account. But for this lab, this are the settings that we are going to use. Okay, excellent. Now Docker will install. I'm going to pause the video and come back after the install completes. Okay, excellent. Docker has finished installing. We'll click close log out. It will terminate our RDP session, so we'll go right back into it. So there's a few default settings that we want to change in Docker. So we're going to go ahead and start it up. can see the Docker runtime in the background. And then we get, I love these cartoon characters, especially the whale. Docker's mascot is a whale. So we're going to click accept. Okay, we can see the engine is starting. So we're going to go right into the settings. And right here where it says choose container terminal, we're going to select system default. And then under the Docker engine, under experimental, we're going to change this to true. Click apply. It was unhappy about the capital T. Okay, once that applies, there are some updates. So we're going to apply the updates. Okay, and now we are up to date. So I'm going to close the settings. So the first thing we need to do is pull an image. So there are all kinds of images on the Docker Hub repository, but Microsoft has their own images for Windows Server Core, Nano Server, and Windows Server. And so what we're going to do is use the Windows Server 2022 core image to create our containers. So this is the command to pull that container, and actually that's for 2025. And there's one more setting that we have to set here. So we're going to open up PowerShell. And we're going to run the Docker CLI IaC, which is located in Program Files, Docker CLI .exe, and then the parameter is switch daemon. And so after we switch the daemon, we're officially ready to pull our first image and start working with containers. So I'm going to just restart PowerShell. And we're going to pull in the 2022 server image. So you can see Docker-V, Docker version 28. And now we're going to pull in the 2022 server core image. So it downloads pretty fast. You'll actually see here within a few minutes it downloads. But then as part of the pull process, there's some extraction that happens. So this does take a little bit of time. I am going to pause the recording while we are pulling in our server core 2022 image. Okay, so we've officially pulled in the image. And in the GUI, we can see here from the Microsoft Container Registry, we've got our first image. So the command to create a container is docker run we're going to call this, its name is going to be IIS set. And then you have to specify this IT parameter or your containers will not stay started. And then we put in the image and then type PowerShell. So this will create the container and start an interactive PowerShell session with the container. Okay, and we can see that the container has been created. It's running. And now we're in the session. You can see it's got a host name and its own IP address. So what we're going to take a look at, we're going to get Windows feature for the web server role. And so the web server role is obviously, it's not installed. So what we're going to do is install the feature, and then after the feature is installed, or excuse me, the role is installed, we're going to commit that to an image and then create other containers off of that committed image. So we can actually just take this and pipe it to install Windows feature. And then I like the verbose parameter to give us more information about what is happening. And this part does take a moment. I'm not sure if it's related to container resources or the core image, but I am going to pause this just to time compress the video just a teeny bit. Okay, so the role is now installed, and that took about 5 minutes, which doesn't seem like a lot of time, but we're going to make 10 of these containers. So if that takes 5 or 6 minutes, you're looking at an hour of just watching the progress bar. Where now we have the web server role installed on this container, and we're actually going to commit it as an image and then create other containers off of this committed image. So we run docker ps-a to see our containers. We've only got the one. And so the command that we are going to use is docker commit. We'll plug in the container ID. And then we give it a tag. So we'll bounce back over to the GUI, take a look at our images. So right now we've only got the Microsoft Container Registry Windows Server 2020, or Windows Core Server 2022. Just a moment, we're going to see our committed image added to the list. Okay, and there it is under this Yahoo testing image. So now we're going to create a container based off of that image. So I first run the Docker images to get the ID, which is this 4.1. So this is the exact same command we used to create our first container, but we're just using a different image, and we're going to call this IIS server 1. Okay, our container is up and running, and now what we're going to do is we're going to configure it to be a web server just like all in the previous labs. So I'm just going to paste it directly into the container PowerShell session. It's going to create this directory. It's going to download the HTML web page and the configuration script, and then run the configuration script to put the server information onto the web page. Okay, so we'll get the IP address of the container. And so now here is our container. So the computer name is the container, but it thinks it's a Windows 20 Server 2022 data center, and that this is its processor and this is its networking information. So that's pretty neat, right? That we were able to do that. And so now the power in this is, let's say we want to make 10 of these. So we can just go into our Docker shell. So when you click exit, it's actually going to stop the container. And then since we use that IT parameter, we can just start it right back up. If you don't use that -IT, the container will just start and then stop. So when you use that IT container, it allows it to keep running. So we'll just use the up arrow. So this is the exact same command that we want to use. We just want to change the name of the container. And so now I'm going to show you a different way to configure this. So we're going to hit exit, and the container is going to stop. So we'll just start it back up. There is a command known as docker exec, where you can use it to run PowerShell commands inside of the container. So here is the command. So instead of copying and pasting this directly into the container session, we are going to execute it from the host. So we'll paste in this command. We need the container ID. We can tell the name here on the side. So we want the server 2. So this is its container ID. Plug it in here. And so this is going to run these PowerShell commands inside of the container. So you can see it's created this temp directory. For the Yahoo script, it's created the JPEG directory. Now it's going to be downloading the images, the default web page, and then running the configuration script to replace that HTML text with the container server information. Okay, so we need to get the IP address, so we can just use the exact same structure, but instead of this big long string, we're just going to do ipconfig. Get its IP address. So that's pretty cool. Now we have our second container that is running our custom web page with the server information. So now what we're going to do for speed 10 times, and we're just going to enter it directly into the terminal each time. So we'll go back to our Docker run, change it to 3. Paste our configuration. So when the container is stopped and started, it will get a new IP address. So if you use the IP config to get the IP address in an interactive session, check out the web browser and then close your container and then start the container, it's going to have a different IP address. So what we're going to do is hit exit each time and then start the container. And then we will get the container ID. And then we will get its IP address with this command. We'll test it, and then there's actually a faster way to do this, where we can get all of the IP addresses at the end. So that's our third container, right? So we had 3 full-on VM web servers in the previous labs. So now we have one host that is hosting 3 different IIS web server roles. Okay, so we're going to go in and create number 4. And then paste the configuration. Actually, I think we can just use the up arrow. Oh, no. And so actually, to even speed this up, you can start opening other shells, right? So that was 4. So we'll go ahead and create 5. And 6. I'm just using the same configuration. And there's different ways you could do this configuration, but for demo purposes, this is kind of the fastest way that I've found. Okay, and we'll take a look at what we've got going on here. So we've got the 5. Let everything just kind of catch up here. Okay, so we'll do 6. Excuse me, 7. And 8. Okay, so we've got our containers here popping in. So we're going to do 10, so we're going to do 2 more. Okay, I might get a little crazy with it here. So I've got 4 PowerShell sessions going. And this last one, 10. So he's finished. Okay, everything is looking good. So we're just going to create these last 2 containers and then test the web pages. And you can see each time I exit, the container will stop. And we'll just start it right back up. Excellent, so we officially have all of our containers. So the ways I showed you how to get the IP address, they're kind of slow. So I discovered a way to get all of the IP addresses. So first you do the docker network ls command to get the network ID. And then we're focused on this NAT network here. So we use that ID. And then it's going to present us a JSON object where we can pick out the IP addresses. So I am going to just start over, do each one. And actually, to keep track of everything, I'm just going to copy this into Notepad just to help me keep track of everything. Okay, container 1. Here is container 2. Container 3. I mean, this is pretty wild. And then container 4. Container 5. And you can see they are all working. This is 6. 7. 8. And 9. I think I missed one. I might only have 9. Let me count real quick. Oh, one is not running. docker ps-a, and then docker so its image is this, starts D727, ends in 02A. Oh, I'm sorry, I did not delete the first image. Sorry about that. I had a little problem there, but here is the IP address of our 10th web server. We can see we've got our 10 IIS containers running our 10 web servers. Okay, and so when we look at each one of these, it'll have its image container ID as its computer name. So, but each one of these has all of the same information. So now we have 10 messages from Mega Man congratulating us on our Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals certification, and we get to celebrate with our Happy Moose